I never thought my sister Haley would slap me across the face in front of 300 wedding guests. I'm Mackenzie, 32, a real estate agent who worked my butt off for 5 years to buy my dream penthouse in downtown Seattle. Our relationship was always complicated, but that public humiliation because I wouldn't hand over my home to her? Unbelievable. The cherry on top? A distinguished family court judge witnessed everything. Let me tell you, this story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Before I dive in, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever stood up to entitled family members. Growing up in the suburbs of Seattle, my family seemed normal enough on the surface. My parents, Diana and Harold Matthews, provided a comfortable middle-class life for my younger sister Haley and me. We shared a modest 4-bedroom house, took annual summer vacations to the Oregon coast, and participated in the usual school activities. But beneath this ordinary facade, the dynamics between Haley and me were anything but balanced. From an early age, our personalities couldn't have been more different. I was the practical one, saving my allowance, planning for the future, and taking my studies seriously. By contrast, Haley was what my parents called a free spirit, which was really their gentle way of saying she expected everything to be handed to her. While I worked part-time jobs throughout high school, Haley spent her time cultivating popularity and expecting our parents to fund her social life. Mackenzie, you need to understand that your sister is sensitive, my mother would say whenever I complained about the obvious favoritism. Not everyone can be as independent as you are. This pattern continued as we grew older. When I graduated high school with honors and a partial scholarship to the University of Washington, my parents threw a modest celebration. When Haley barely graduated 2 years later, they rewarded her with a trip to Hawaii to decompress from the stress. I majored in business with a focus on real estate, fascinated by property development and investment. College wasn't easy. I juggled classes with 2 part-time jobs to minimize student loans. Meanwhile, Haley drifted through 3 different community colleges, changing majors whenever coursework became too demanding. After graduation, I secured an entry-level position at a prestigious real estate firm in Seattle. The hours were brutal, but I was determined to succeed. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with second-hand furniture, saving every possible penny. My 5-year plan included building my client base, earning my broker's license, and eventually purchasing my own home. "You work too hard," Haley would comment during our increasingly rare family gatherings. By then, she had moved back home with our parents after another failed attempt at college. Life's about more than just working and saving. Despite her criticism, I remained focused. By 27, I had established myself as one of the top producing agents at my firm, specializing in luxury condominiums. My dream of homeownership had evolved into something specific, a penthouse unit in the newly constructed Emerald Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. For 3 years, I worked overtime, took on difficult clients others avoided, and continued to live far below my means. I skipped vacations, bought clothes from thrift stores, and ate home-cooked meals while my colleagues dined at expensive restaurants. Every sacrifice had a purpose. Then came the pattern that should have warned me about what was to come. As my success grew, so did Haley's requests. "Kenzie, can I borrow your designer handbag for this date? I'll return it tomorrow." The bag would come back weeks later, stained or damaged. "Kenzie, I need to use your credit card for this online course that will totally change my career path. I'll pay you back next month." The money never materialized. "Kenzie, I crashed my car and need to borrow yours for a few days." My car returned with an empty tank and mysterious new scratches. Despite these frustrations, I finally achieved my goal at age 30. After outbidding several other interested buyers, I signed the papers for my dream penthouse, 1,800 square feet of modern luxury with breathtaking views, a gourmet kitchen, and a private rooftop terrace. The mortgage was steep, but I had run the numbers meticulously. This was my reward for years of discipline and hard work. When I hosted a small housewarming party, Haley's first comment wasn't congratulatory. "Must be nice to have so much money to throw around," she said, running her fingers along my new quartz countertops. "Some of us aren't so lucky." By then, Haley had cycled through several retail and restaurant jobs, never lasting more than a few months at each. Our parents continued to subsidize her lifestyle, paying her phone bill and car insurance even though she was 26. The following year brought a surprising development. Haley met Ryan Blackwell at a charity gala she had attended using a ticket I'd given her. Ryan came from a family with old Seattle money and projected an aura of success with his tailored suits and confident demeanor. Within 6 months, they were engaged. "He's absolutely perfect," my mother gushed during a family dinner announcing their engagement. "He works in finance and comes from such a good family." I was genuinely happy for my sister. Ryan seemed to adore her, and perhaps this relationship would finally give her the stability and purpose she needed. When she flashed her 3-carat diamond ring, I pushed aside the small voice, wondering how someone who supposedly valued experiences over materialism could be so enthralled by an expensive stone. Little did I know that this engagement would set in motion a chain of events that would culminate in that shocking moment at their wedding, when my sister's hand struck my face in front of hundreds of witnesses, including a family court judge who would soon play an unexpected role in our family drama. The transformation from my carefree sister to demanding bride happened almost overnight. The Haley who had once mocked the wedding industrial complex suddenly became obsessed with creating the perfect, Instagram-worthy celebration. And as her maid of honor, a role I reluctantly accepted, I had a front-row seat to the spectacle. "The venue costs $25,000 for just the space," Haley informed me during our first wedding planning lunch. She said this casually, as though discussing the price of a sandwich. "But Ryan says we deserve the best." I nearly choked on my water. "That's substantial. Are his parents covering most of the costs?" A shadow crossed her face. "We're figuring out the details. Ryan's investments have been a little unpredictable lately, but he assures me everything will work out." This was my first hint that something might be off about Ryan's financial situation, but I dismissed it. After all, wealthy people sometimes experience temporary cash flow issues. As the months progressed, Haley's demands multiplied exponentially. I received daily texts about bridesmaid dress colors, flower arrangements, and cake tastings I was expected to attend. When I explained that I couldn't miss an important client meeting for an appointment with a calligrapher, Haley burst into tears. "You've always been selfish, Mackenzie. This is the most important day of my life, and you can't even adjust your precious schedule." My friend Brianna became my lifeline during this period. We had met in college and remained close despite her move to Portland a few years earlier. During our weekly phone calls, I could vent freely. I spent $300 on a bridal shower gift, and she complained it wasn't from the high-end registry, I told Brianna one evening. Meanwhile, I've taken so much time off work for wedding stuff that my commission checks are taking a hit. "Sounds like classic Haley," Brianna replied. "Taking everything you give and still wanting more." Brianna had never been Haley's biggest fan, having witnessed her self-centered behavior during our college years. But even she was shocked when I shared what happened during a wedding planning session at my penthouse. Haley had asked to meet at my place to discuss the bachelorette party. As she walked around my living room, running her fingers over my furniture and staring out at the view of Elliott Bay, something in her expression changed. "This place is absolutely perfect," she said, more to herself than to me. Then, turning to face me, "Ryan and I have been talking about where we'll live after the wedding." "I thought you were looking at that new development in Queen Anne," I replied, referring to an upscale neighborhood they had mentioned. "We were, but honestly, this would be so much better for us." She gestured around my home as if she were already imagining her belongings in it, especially while we're establishing ourselves as a couple. I laughed, thinking she was joking. Well, you're welcome to visit any time, but I'm quite attached to my home. Don't be ridiculous, Mackenzie. You could easily find another place. You're single with no kids. We need the space more than you do, especially when we start a family. The casual entitlement in her voice left me speechless. Was my sister seriously suggesting I give up my home, the one I had worked years to afford, simply because she wanted it? Haley, this isn't happening. I'm happy to help with wedding planning, but my home isn't part of that package. She stormed out, and for a blissful week, the barrage of wedding texts ceased. I hoped she had come to her senses. I was wrong. The bridal shower, hosted at our parents' house, should have been a pleasant afternoon with finger sandwiches and champagne. Instead, it became the stage for Haley's next move. Surrounded by 30 women, including future in-laws and colleagues, Haley clinked her glass for attention during the gift opening. Before I open these lovely presents, Ryan and I have an announcement, she beamed. After the honeymoon, we'll be moving into Mackenzie's gorgeous penthouse. She's generously offered it to us while we look for our forever home. The room erupted in applause and congratulatory murmurs. All eyes turned to me, expecting the proud, self-sacrificing sister to confirm this grand gesture. There must be some confusion, I said, keeping my voice steady. I haven't offered my home to anyone. An awkward silence fell over the room. Haley's smile froze. Don't be modest, sis, she said through gritted teeth. We've discussed this. We discussed it when you suggested it, and I declined. I corrected her. My home is not available. The shower never recovered from that uncomfortable exchange. Guests hurriedly offered Haley other gifts, while my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. Why are you doing this to your sister? She hissed. You know how important appearances are to her. I'm not doing anything except refusing to give away my home, I replied. Why are you taking her side in this insanity? Because family helps family, Mackenzie. You've always had everything come easily to you. Would it kill you to make a sacrifice for once? Her words stung like a physical blow. Everything come easily? The years of working multiple jobs, the sacrifices, the careful budgeting, none of that had been easy. But in my family's revisionist history, my success was apparently a lucky accident rather than the result of determination and hard work. As I drove home that evening, I realized the shower incident was just the beginning. The entitlement that had been cultivated throughout Haley's life had reached its peak, and my penthouse had become the ultimate prize she felt deserved. The collision course was set, though I couldn't yet envision just how publicly and painfully it would culminate. 3 weeks after the bridal shower disaster, I received a text from Haley asking to meet for coffee. Hoping for reconciliation, I agreed, suggesting a quiet cafe near my office. When I arrived, I found not just Haley but Ryan waiting for me, his expression a calculated mix of charm and determination. Mackenzie, thanks for meeting us, Ryan began, after I'd barely taken my seat. We wanted to discuss our housing situation directly, without any misunderstandings. I took a slow sip of my latte. I think I've been pretty clear, but go ahead. Here's the situation, Ryan said, leaning forward. Haley and I are starting our life together, and we need a suitable place to live. Your penthouse is perfect for our needs, and frankly, it makes sense for family to help family during transitions. I'm confused about why my home is even being considered, I replied. Weren't you looking at properties in Queen Anne? Or what about your family's connections, Ryan? Surely they could help with real estate. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. My financial portfolio is experiencing some temporary readjustments. Nothing serious, just timing issues with certain investments. The Queen and properties are overpriced anyway. What Ryan is trying to say, Haley interjected, is that we need a little help right now. Just for a year or two, until his investments mature. You could rent a smaller place temporarily. It would be an adventure. An adventure, I repeated flatly. Giving up my home so you can live there rent-free would be an adventure for me. We never said rent-free, Ryan protested, though his expression suggested exactly that. What were you planning to pay? I asked. The silence and exchanged glances told me everything. Look, I said finally. I sympathize with whatever financial situation you're facing, but my home is not the solution. I can help you look for affordable rentals if you'd like. Haley's face hardened. After everything I've done for you over the years, this is how you repay me? By refusing to help when I really need it. I struggled to recall exactly what she had done for me, but before I could respond, Ryan played his next card. Mackenzie, I'll be honest with you. I've had some unexpected financial setbacks. Nothing permanent, but my liquidity is temporarily compromised. We need a stable living situation while things recover. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. But that doesn't change my answer. You've always been selfish, Haley snapped, tears forming. You have this massive place all to yourself while we're struggling. It's not fair. The conversation deteriorated from there. Accusations flew, mostly about my alleged selfishness and lack of family loyalty. I maintained my position, though with each passing minute, the weight of their combined pressure made me question myself. Was I being unreasonable? Should family members expect to surrender their homes to each other? That evening, my parents called. Of course, Haley had immediately reported our conversation to them. Mackenzie, my father began, his voice carrying that special tone of disappointment he reserved for me. We raised you to understand the importance of family. I do understand family importance, Dad. I just don't think it includes giving up my home. It's temporary, my mother chimed in. Haley says Ryan is just going through a short financial rough patch. Then they should rent an apartment they can afford until things improve, I countered. You have the means to help them start their marriage right, my father said. Instead, you're choosing material possessions over your sister's happiness. The conversation went in circles, with my parents unable or unwilling to see my perspective. After hanging up, I felt the familiar doubts creeping in, the lifetime of conditioning that Haley's needs always came first, that my achievements were somehow less deserving of respect. Seeking clarity, I called Brianna, who had always been my voice of reason. They're manipulating you, she said firmly after hearing the story. Your home is not community property for family members to claim. The entitlement is astounding. Her certainty helped, but I still felt conflicted. Then Brianna asked a question that changed everything. Have you looked into Ryan's financial background? If he's having money troubles serious enough to need free housing, maybe you should understand what's really going on. That suggestion led me down a rabbit hole I hadn't anticipated. Using my real estate industry connections, I discreetly inquired about Ryan Blackwell. The picture that emerged was troubling. Ryan came from money, yes, but his personal finances were a disaster. Multiple creditors were pursuing him for unpaid debts. His investment portfolio consisted primarily of high-risk ventures that had collapsed. Most alarmingly, there were rumors of gambling debts, substantial ones. The Ryan who presented himself as a successful finance professional was largely fiction. He maintained appearances through family connections and charm, but beneath the surface lurked serious financial problems that wouldn't be resolved in a year or two. Armed with this knowledge, I felt more certain about my decision. I wasn't just protecting my property, I was avoiding entanglement in what could become a financial nightmare. Around this time, I reconnected with Ethan Parker, a former colleague who had started his own brokerage. We had always had a friendly rapport, and when we met for a business lunch to discuss a potential collaboration, the conversation turned personal. I found myself sharing the ongoing drama with my sister. Boundaries aren't selfish, Ethan assured me. They're necessary for healthy relationships. Your sister's wedding isn't a reason to upend your life. His support was refreshing, straightforward, and without the complicated history that colored my family's perspective. We began spending more time together, and his balanced viewpoint helped anchor me during the increasingly turbulent weeks before the wedding. The bachelor and bachelorette parties provided the next flashpoint. Haley had insisted on a lavish weekend in Las Vegas, with her 6 bridesmaids expected to cover not only their own expenses, but hers as well. The estimated cost per person was over $1,000, a significant sum for a long weekend. 2 bridesmaids quietly dropped out, citing financial constraints. Haley was furious, calling them fake friends who didn't understand the importance of her special time. I paid my share without complaint, though it meant postponing some home maintenance I had planned. In Vegas, Haley's behavior shocked even her most loyal friends. She demanded suite upgrades, expected others to pay for her meals and drinks, and threw a tantrum when a reservation at an exclusive club fell through. By the final day, the remaining bridesmaids were exchanging weary glances and keeping their distance. On our flight home, Brianna texted me, "How was the bachelorette disaster?" Eye-opening, I replied. Even Haley's oldest friends are seeing her true colors. Just 1 week before the wedding, Haley and Ryan made their final play. They arrived at my penthouse unannounced on a Sunday morning. "We need to resolve this before the wedding," Haley declared as they pushed past me into the living room. "The stress is affecting my skin, and the photographer is coming for final consultations." Ryan had abandoned his earlier charm. "Look, Mackenzie, this is happening. We've already told our friends we're moving in here after the honeymoon. We can't walk that back now." "Then you've created a problem for yourselves," I said firmly. My answer hasn't changed. Haley's face contorted with rage. "If you don't agree to this, I'll make sure everyone knows what a terrible sister you are. I'll tell everyone at the wedding how you refused to help us when we needed it most." "That's your choice," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "But it doesn't change my decision." "You'll regret this," Haley hissed as they left. "I promise you'll regret this." As their footsteps receded down the hallway, I had no idea just how publicly that threat would play out, or how it would ultimately backfire in ways none of us could have anticipated. The morning of Haley's wedding arrived with deceptive calm. Seattle offered one of its rare perfect summer days, clear blue skies, mild temperatures, and Mount Rainier visible in the distance. As I drove to the upscale hotel where the bridal party would prepare, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps the day could proceed without incident. Maybe Haley, caught up in wedding excitement, would set aside our conflict temporarily. This optimism lasted approximately 15 minutes. "You're late," Haley snapped when I entered the hotel suite, though I had arrived precisely at the agreed time. 5 other bridesmaids were already there, along with my mother, the makeup artist, and the hairstylist. The tension in the room was palpable. "Good morning to you too," I replied, hanging up my garment bag containing the dusty rose bridesmaid dress I'd paid $320 for. "How can I help?" For the next 4 hours, I fulfilled my maid of honor duties with mechanical precision. I fetched champagne, held hairpins, adjusted the train of Haley's elaborate gown, and maintained a pleasant expression despite the undercurrent of hostility directed my way. My mother watched me with narrowed eyes, as though expecting me to sabotage the proceedings at any moment. "You could at least pretend to be happy for your sister," she whispered as we had a rare moment alone. "I am happy for her," I responded truthfully. "I want her marriage to succeed. I just don't want it to succeed in my home." My mother sighed dramatically. Always so stubborn. By the time we departed for the ceremony venue, an exclusive waterfront garden that had indeed cost an eye-watering sum, I was emotionally exhausted. The other bridesmaids sensed something was off, but remained tactfully silent, focusing instead on keeping their elaborate updos intact as we traveled in the limousine. The ceremony itself was surprisingly touching. Standing beside my sister as she exchanged vows with Ryan, I felt a genuine moment of connection. Whatever our differences, she was still the little girl who had once followed me around the house, wanting to play school and borrow my toys. When she recited her vows with tears glistening in her eyes, I found myself hoping that despite everything I knew about Ryan's finances, they might build a happy life together. As we proceeded down the aisle after the ceremony, I caught sight of an older gentleman in the audience, distinguished, with silver hair and an air of quiet authority. Something about him seemed familiar, but I couldn't place him in the moment. "That's Judge Lawrence Wilson," whispered the bridesmaid behind me. "He's a family court judge. My parents know him from their charity work." I nodded, filing away the information without realizing its future significance. The cocktail hour passed without incident as guests mingled on the terrace overlooking the Sound. I stayed busy with photography sessions and helping coordinate the transition to the reception. Haley seemed genuinely happy, and I began to think we might get through the day without confrontation. The reception began with the traditional entrance of the wedding party. The elegant ballroom was decorated with thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers, accommodating 300 guests at tables draped in silk. No expense had been spared, which made me increasingly uneasy given what I knew about Ryan's financial situation. Dinner service proceeded smoothly. I was seated at the head table between a groomsman I'd never met and an empty chair reserved for the best man, who was preparing his speech. The temporary reprieve allowed me to relax slightly, enjoying my salmon entree and glass of Chardonnay. Then came the speeches. The best man, Ryan's college roommate, delivered the usual light-hearted roast combined with sentimental memories. My father spoke next, welcoming Ryan to the family with emotional words about the meaning of marriage. Then, unexpectedly, Haley stood and took the microphone. "I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate with us today," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the professional sound system. "Ryan and I are so blessed to have such wonderful friends and family supporting us as we begin our journey together. Standard fare so far." I took another sip of wine. "Speaking of our journey," Haley continued, her eyes finding mine, "we're excited to announce that after our honeymoon in Bali, we'll be moving into a beautiful penthouse in the Emerald Tower, thanks to my generous sister, Mackenzie." The room erupted in applause. 300 pairs of eyes turned toward me, including those of Ryan's wealthy family members, our extended family, and countless friends. Haley's smile was triumphant, her expression clearly conveying the message, "Deny me now," in front of everyone. The moment stretched like glass about to shatter. I had 3 choices: go along with the lie to avoid making a scene, remain silent in passive agreement, or correct the false statement. Years of conditioning pushed me toward the first option: keep the peace, don't embarrass the family, put Haley first. But something had changed in me through this ordeal. Boundaries matter. Truth matters. Self-respect matters. I stood, took the microphone Haley extended, and smiled politely. "I'm so happy for Haley and Ryan on their special day," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I need to clarify something. While I wish them every happiness in their new life together, they will not be moving into my home. I'm sure they'll find the perfect place to begin their marriage." The silence that followed was absolute. Haley's face flushed deep red, clashing with her white gown. Ryan stared at the table, avoiding eye contact with his family members. My mother covered her face with her hands. Then, with shocking speed, Haley lunged forward and slapped me hard across the face. The crack of her palm against my cheek echoed through the silent ballroom. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My eyes watered from the sting, but I remained standing, refusing to escalate the situation further. "How dare you humiliate me at my own wedding," Haley hissed, loud enough for the first few rows of guests to hear. "After everything we've done for you." Without another word, I placed the microphone on the table, gathered my small clutch purse, and walked calmly through the stunned crowd toward the exit. No one tried to stop me. As I passed the tables, I noticed Judge Wilson watching intently, his expression unreadable. Outside, the summer evening was still beautiful, in stark contrast to the ugliness I'd just experienced. As I waited for my Uber, tears finally came, not from the physical pain, but from the public humiliation and the realization that my relationship with my sister might never recover from this moment. What I didn't know then was that the slap witnessed by 300 people, including a family court judge, would set in motion consequences that neither Haley nor Ryan had anticipated. The morning after the wedding, I woke to 43 text messages and 17 missed calls. Most were from family members expressing either outrage at my selfish behavior or awkward concern about the incident. None were from Haley or Ryan, who had presumably departed for their 2-week honeymoon in Bali, a trip I later learned was mostly funded by Ryan's increasingly concerned parents. I spent the day in my penthouse with the blinds drawn, alternating between crying and staring numbly at the ceiling. The physical mark from Haley's slap had faded, but the emotional impact lingered like a bruise pressed too hard. For the first time in my adult life, I called in sick to work, unable to face clients or colleagues in my current state. Brianna called that evening, having heard about the incident from mutual friends who had attended the wedding. "She actually hit you? In front of everyone?" Her voice conveyed both shock and vindication. "Mackenzie, that's assault." "It's family drama," I sighed. "Embarrassing, painful family drama." "No, it's literally assault," Brianna insisted. "You could press charges if you wanted to." The thought hadn't even occurred to me. In our family, Haley's outbursts had always been excused as passionate or emotional, never treated as something with potential legal consequences. "I just want this to be over," I told her. "Once they're back from the honeymoon, maybe things will cool down." But there would be no cooling down period. 3 days after the wedding, my building security called to inform me that a couple claiming to be my family members had attempted to access my unit. When denied entry, they had become argumentative, insisting they had permission to move some items in ahead of taking residence. "Did you authorize anyone to access your home, Ms. Matthews?" the security manager asked. "Absolutely not," I replied, a chill running through me. "That's what I thought." "We've documented the incident and have footage if you need it." I thanked him, then immediately called the locksmith to change my locks, despite the building's secure access system. Something about the attempt to enter my home without permission crossed a line from family conflict into something more concerning. That evening, I received an email from an unfamiliar address, lwilson@kingcountycourts.gov. The subject line read, "Regarding the incident at the Blackwell-Matthews wedding." Judge Lawrence Wilson, the distinguished guest I had noticed at the ceremony, had reached out to express concern about what he had witnessed. "As someone who has presided over many family disputes," he wrote, "I recognized several troubling patterns in the interaction. While I cannot offer legal advice in my position, I would encourage you to document everything and consider speaking with an attorney about protective measures." His email provided the final push I needed. The next day, I contacted a lawyer specializing in family law and personal protection orders, showing her the security footage of Haley and Ryan attempting to access my penthouse, along with screenshots of increasingly threatening texts from both of them, painted a concerning picture. "You definitely have grounds for a restraining order," the lawyer, Natalie Hernandez, confirmed. The physical assault witnessed by hundreds, followed by an unauthorized attempt to enter your residence, establishes a clear pattern. Will this make things worse? I worried. "They're still my family." Ms. Matthews, Natalie said gently, "Family members who respect boundaries don't slap you in public or try to take your home. This isn't about punishing them, it's about protecting yourself." While we were preparing the necessary documentation, the situation escalated further. My parents arrived unannounced at my office, creating an uncomfortable scene in front of colleagues and clients. "How could you do this to your sister?" my mother demanded, her voice carrying across the quiet office. "Filing legal papers against family? What is wrong with you?" My father stood silently beside her, his disappointment radiating in waves. "Mom, Dad, this isn't the place," I said quietly, ushering them toward a conference room. Once the door closed behind us, I took a deep breath. Haley slapped me in front of hundreds of people, then tried to enter my home without permission. What exactly should I be doing instead? She was emotional. It was her wedding day, my mother exclaimed. And they weren't trying to break in, they were just seeing if they could drop off some wedding gifts before leaving for their honeymoon. The blatant rewriting of reality struck me anew. This was how it had always been. Haley's actions justified and excused, the narrative twisted to maintain her status as the victim. The security cameras show them arguing with staff and claiming they had permission to move in, I said flatly. That's not dropping off gifts. Ryan has explained everything, my father finally spoke. They were confused about the timing. There's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I replied, is their belief that they're entitled to my home. And now they've escalated to trying to access it without permission. My parents left in anger, warning that I was tearing the family apart with my overreaction. That evening, I received calls from 2 aunts and an uncle, each expressing their shock at my decision to sue my own sister, a wild exaggeration of the restraining order filing. As the Bali honeymoon neared its end, the stakes rose again. An email from Ryan arrived, its tone alternating between threatening and cajoling. Mackenzie, this restraining order nonsense needs to stop immediately. Haley is devastated that you would take a momentary emotional outburst and turn it into a legal matter. We're prepared to forgive this overreaction if you'll drop the charges and reconsider our housing arrangement. If not, we may need to discuss certain financial matters with your employer and clients. The vague threat against my professional reputation pushed me from hesitation into resolve. I forwarded the email to Natalie, who added it to our growing file of evidence. 2 days before Haley and Ryan were scheduled to return, Judge Wilson reached out again, this time with information that surprised me. In my capacity as a family court judge, he wrote, I received your restraining order application. While I would normally recuse myself due to witnessing the precipitating incident, I wanted to inform you that I've become aware of additional concerning matters regarding Mr. Blackwell that may be relevant to your case. Through his judicial connections, Judge Wilson had learned that Ryan was under investigation for financial improprieties related to client funds at his former employer. Nothing had been proven yet, but there were serious questions about missing investment money and possible gambling connections. This information confirmed my earlier findings and added new dimensions to my concerns. What had begun as a dispute over my penthouse now seemed potentially connected to Ryan's desperate need for a rent-free living situation while legal troubles loomed. When I shared this development with Brianna and Ethan, who had become increasingly supportive through this ordeal, they both expressed the same concern. This wasn't just about entitlement anymore. This was about potentially becoming entangled in something much more problematic. If they moved into your place, Ethan pointed out, and then Ryan got charged with financial crimes, your property could potentially be dragged into legal proceedings. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the day after Haley and Ryan's return. As I prepared with Natalie, reviewing our evidence and practicing my testimony, I felt a strange calm replacing the anxiety that had plagued me for weeks. For the first time in our relationship, Haley's actions would have consequences that no one could explain away or minimize. The stage was set for a confrontation unlike any our family had experienced before, one that would take place not at a dinner table or wedding reception, but in the formal confines of a courtroom. The King County Courthouse stands as an imposing granite and marble structure in downtown Seattle, its formal architecture a stark reminder that what happens inside has real consequences. As I climbed the wide steps on that overcast morning, Natalie Hernandez beside me carrying a sleek leather portfolio, my stomach knotted with a mixture of dread and determination. Remember, Natalie said quietly, stick to the facts. No matter what emotional accusations might be thrown your way, the judge is only interested in documented evidence and specific incidents. Ethan had offered to accompany me for moral support, waiting now in the lobby to avoid any accusations of witness coaching. Brianna had sent a text of encouragement from Portland. Truth wins. Stay strong. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for Courtroom 3C, presided over by Judge Rebecca Martinez, not Judge Wilson, who had appropriately recused himself but provided a detailed witness statement. The courtroom was mostly empty when we arrived, though I recognized my parents sitting stiffly in the back row, their expressions unreadable. At precisely 9:30 a.m., the bailiff called our case. As I moved to the plaintiff's table, the side door opened, and Haley entered alongside Ryan and their attorney, a silver-haired man with an expensive suit and imperious demeanor. Haley's eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect makeup slightly smudged, creating the perfect image of the wronged sister. Ryan maintained his polished appearance, though the confident charm seemed dimmed in these formal surroundings. Judge Martinez, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner, reviewed the paperwork before addressing the court. "We're here on petition number 21 to 4587, Matthews versus Blackwell, request for protective order," she stated. "I've reviewed the initial filing and response. Ms. Hernandez, please present your client's case." Natalie outlined our position with clinical precision: the escalating pattern of entitlement, the public assault at the wedding, the unauthorized attempt to access my home, and the threatening communications that followed. "Your Honor, we have security footage from Ms. Matthews' building showing the respondents attempting to gain access without permission, claiming they had rights to the property," Natalie explained, submitting the video evidence. "We also have witness statements from the security staff documenting the respondents' claims that they were moving in despite having no authorization." Judge Martinez reviewed the footage carefully, her expression unchanging. When she looked up, her gaze shifted to Haley and Ryan. "Mr. Lowell," she addressed their attorney, "your response." The silver-haired lawyer stood with practiced gravitas. "Your Honor, this is simply an unfortunate family misunderstanding that has been blown out of proportion. MS. Blackwell's actions at the wedding were an emotional response during a highly stressful day, not an indication of any ongoing threat. As for the building visit, my clients were merely attempting to deliver wedding gifts before their honeymoon, not breaking in as dramatically claimed." Haley nodded emphatically at this revision of events, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "And the communications suggesting Ms. Matthews should surrender her home to the respondents?" Judge Martinez inquired. "Merely family discussions about helping the newlyweds get established," Mr. Lowell replied smoothly. "Perhaps misunderstood by Ms. Matthews, but certainly not threatening." The judge's expression remained neutral as she turned to me. "Ms. Matthews, please describe in your own words the incident at the wedding reception." Taking a deep breath, I recounted the events exactly as they had occurred. Haley's public announcement about moving into my penthouse, my calm correction of this misrepresentation, and the slap that followed. "And prior to this incident, had you clearly communicated to your sister and Mr. Blackwell that they did not have permission to live in your home?" "Multiple times, Your Honor, both verbally and in writing. I have text messages and emails documenting these conversations." Natalie presented the communications, along with Judge Wilson's witness statement describing what he had observed at the wedding. The judge reviewed everything carefully before turning to Haley. "Ms. Blackwell, did you strike your sister at your wedding reception?" Haley's composure cracked slightly. It wasn't like that. I was emotional. She embarrassed me in front of all our guests by contradicting me during my special day." "That doesn't answer my question," Judge Martinez pressed. "Did you physically strike Ms. Matthews?" "Yes," Haley admitted reluctantly. "But it wasn't planned or threatening. It was a reaction." "And afterward, did you attempt to access her residence without permission?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably as Haley faltered. Their attorney quickly intervened. "Your Honor, my clients had reason to believe they had implicit permission." "Mr. Blackwell," Judge Martinez interrupted, addressing Ryan directly. "The security footage clearly shows you stating to building personnel that you were moving in and that Ms. Matthews had agreed to this arrangement. Was that statement accurate?" Put on the spot, Ryan's polished facade began to crack. "We had discussions about the arrangement. There might have been some miscommunication about the timing." "So you acknowledge you did not have explicit permission at that time?" "Technically, no," Ryan admitted. The hearing continued with the presentation of additional evidence, including the threatening email Ryan had sent regarding my professional reputation. When this was read aloud, my parents' expressions shifted from disapproval to confusion. This part of the story had clearly been omitted from whatever version they had been told. Then came the most damaging revelation. Judge Martinez referenced a sealed document provided by the Securities Division of the Washington State Department of Financial Institutions. Mr. Blackwell, are you currently under investigation for financial improprieties at your former place of employment? The color drained from Ryan's face. Their attorney immediately objected to the relevance of the question. Your Honor, I fail to see how Mr. Blackwell's professional matters relate to this family dispute. The relevance, Judge Martinez replied coolly, is to establish potential motivation for the aggressive pursuit of Ms. Matthews' residence, particularly in light of the threatening communication regarding her professional standing. Mr. Blackwell, please answer the question. After a whispered consultation with his attorney, Ryan reluctantly confirmed the investigation, though he insisted it was a misunderstanding that will be resolved. By the time closing arguments were presented, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted dramatically. What Haley and Ryan had clearly expected to be a minor family matter easily dismissed had transformed into a serious examination of their actions and motivations. Judge Martinez delivered her ruling without leaving the bench. Based on the evidence presented, including the documented physical assault witnessed by hundreds, the unauthorized attempt to access the plaintiff's residence, and the subsequent threatening communications, I am granting the protective order as requested. She outlined the specific terms. Haley and Ryan were to maintain a distance of at least 100 feet from me, my home, and my workplace. All communication must be through attorneys for the next 6 months, after which the order would be reviewed. Additionally, she continued, I am referring the unauthorized access attempt to the prosecutor's office for review of potential trespassing charges, and Mr. Blackwell's threatening communication regarding Ms. Matthews' professional standing for potential extortion evaluation. Haley gasped audibly, while Ryan conferred urgently with their attorney. My parents sat in stunned silence. This court takes family violence and property violations seriously, regardless of the relationship between the parties, Judge Martinez concluded. Being family does not grant immunity from legal consequences for harmful actions. As we gathered our materials to leave, I caught sight of my parents' faces. The shock and confusion I saw there suggested they were finally processing the reality of the situation, perhaps seeing for the first time the extent of Haley and Ryan's behavior without the filter of family bias. Outside the courtroom, Ethan waited with a supportive smile. How did it go? The judge granted everything we asked for, I said, still processing the outcome. And potentially more. As we walked toward the exit, I heard my name called. Turning, I saw my father approaching alone, his expression troubled. Mackenzie, he began, then faltered. The things that were said in there. About Ryan being investigated. About the threats. We didn't know. There's a lot you didn't know, Dad, I replied quietly. Because you didn't ask. You assumed I was the problem. He had no response to that truth. After an awkward moment, he simply said, Your mother and I need to think about all this, before turning back toward the courtroom where Haley remained. It wasn't an apology or even an acknowledgement of their role in enabling the situation, but it was perhaps the beginning of a realization. As I walked down the courthouse steps into the misting Seattle rain, I felt not triumph, but a complicated mixture of vindication, sadness, and, most surprisingly, relief. The truth had finally been exposed to the light, and with it came the possibility of building something new from the broken pieces of what had. 6 months after the courthouse confrontation, I stood on my penthouse terrace, watching a spectacular sunset paint the Seattle skyline in shades of gold and crimson. The beauty of the moment struck me as particularly poignant, a reminder that life continues its rhythms regardless of personal turmoil. My home remained my sanctuary, more precious to me now for having been defended. The protective order had been extended for another year at the review hearing, though by then it had become largely unnecessary. Haley and Ryan's marriage had imploded spectacularly just 3 months after the wedding, their relationship unable to withstand the combined pressures of legal troubles and financial reality. Ryan's professional investigation had escalated into formal charges of misappropriation of client funds, with evidence suggesting gambling losses had motivated his desperate need for free housing. He had accepted a plea deal that included restitution, probation, and a permanent ban from the financial industry. The last I heard, he had moved back to his parents' guest house in Bellevue, his carefully constructed image of success thoroughly dismantled. Haley had retreated to our parents' home following the separation, her dream wedding now a painful memory rather than the fairy tale beginning she had envisioned. We had not spoken directly since the courtroom, though my mother occasionally provided careful updates during our now monthly phone calls. Those calls represented a tentative rebuilding of my relationship with my parents, not a return to what was, but the slow construction of something new. The revelations in court had forced them to confront realities they had long ignored, though old habits of making excuses for Haley died hard. "She's been through a lot, Mackenzie," my mother had said during our most recent conversation. The divorce, the public embarrassment, moving back home at 28. "It's been difficult for her." "I understand that, Mom," I had replied. "But difficulty doesn't justify what happened." "No," she had admitted after a pause. "It doesn't." That simple acknowledgement represented significant progress. My parents were beginning to recognize that while they could support Haley through her difficulties, they shouldn't enable harmful behavior or expect others to accept mistreatment. My own healing process had been gradual but steady. The initial shock and hurt had given way to careful reflection on the family patterns that had culminated in that wedding day slap. Therapy had helped me understand that my lifetime of accommodating Haley's demands had contributed to her sense of entitlement. By always yielding to keep the peace, I had helped create the very dynamics I resented. Brianna had remained my steadfast friend throughout, her unflinching perspective helping me maintain clarity when doubts crept in. "Boundaries aren't just for your protection," she reminded me often. "They're actually gifts to relationships. Without them, there's no foundation for healthy connection." Ethan had become much more than a supportive colleague. Our relationship had deepened naturally in the months following the court hearing, his steady presence and undemanding support creating a space where I could be vulnerable without fear of exploitation. Last month, he had moved in, not because he needed a place to stay, but because we both wanted to build a life together. Perhaps the most unexpected development had been my friendship with Judge Lawrence Wilson and his wife, Margaret. After the legal proceedings concluded, they had invited me to dinner, where Lawrence explained that witnessing the wedding incident had reminded him of dynamics in his own family decades earlier. "Sometimes," he told me over dessert, "it takes someone completely outside the family system to see clearly what's happening within it." As a judge, I've watched countless families trapped in destructive patterns they can't recognize because they're too close to them. His perspective had been invaluable as I navigated the complicated emotions of setting boundaries with family. At 72, Lawrence had the wisdom of someone who had seen both the consequences of enabling harmful behavior and the possibilities for growth when people committed to healthier relationships. Last week, I had received an unexpected email from Haley, the first direct communication since the protective order had been modified to allow electronic contact. The message was brief but significant. "I've been doing a lot of thinking with my therapist about what happened. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I want you to know I'm working on understanding my part in everything. H." No apology, no dramatic reconciliation, but perhaps a small seed that might eventually grow into something healthier. I had responded simply, "Thank you for letting me know. I'm doing the same work on my end." As the sunset faded into twilight, Ethan joined me on the terrace, handing me a glass of wine. "Deep thoughts?" he asked, noticing my contemplative expression. Just reflecting on how much has changed in 6 months, I replied. Sometimes standing your ground feels like the end of something, but it can actually be the beginning. To new beginnings, then, he said, raising his glass to mine. The gentle chime of my phone interrupted the moment, a text from my father asking if we might have lunch next week, just the two of us. Another small step in the rebuilding process. The journey had taught me lessons I would never forget, that true family support uplifts rather than diminishes, that love without respect is ultimately destructive. That people who truly care about you respect your boundaries, and most importantly, that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential for authentic relationships. My penthouse was more than just property worth defending. It represented the life I had built through hard work and determination, a physical manifestation of my values and choices. In protecting it, I had ultimately protected something much more valuable, my self-respect and the possibility of healthier relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligation. As the city lights began to twinkle against the darkening sky, I realized that sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most necessary growth. The sister who had slapped me in front of 300 people had unwittingly given me the push I needed to break free from destructive family patterns. And for that, paradoxically, I was grateful. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who didn't respect what was yours? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more about navigating challenging family dynamics and building a life on your own terms. Thank you for listening to my journey. May it give you courage if you're facing similar challenges in your own life.